This week I'm looking at a Panasonic Lumix LX15, that's LX10 in the US, to see how well it performs as a vlogging camera. I'm shooting pretty much everything in 4K these days, and while I loved my old Canon G7X Mark II, probably the most praised vlogging camera out there, the lack of 4K meant it was really starting to fall into disuse. But the Panasonic Lumix LX15 caught my eye. It's a 4K camera, it's got a very bright lens, meaning it's good for low light and nighttime filming. I see this as a tool to supplement my daytime shooting with the bigger camera. I can just pop this in my pocket and pretty much take it anywhere and use it in the evening, rather than wandering around the streets late at night with a load of expensive camera gear hanging around my neck. The LX15 boasts Panasonic 4K recording on a 1-inch sensor and a f1.4 lens. Makes it sound ideal for vlogging, but does it live up to expectations? Here's some real-world examples testing the camera out in the sort of environments I expect to use it in. I'll show you some of the great footage that it can do, and also some of the things that let it down a bit in my opinion.
Firstly, I take the camera out to a London pub in the early evening. Much like the G7X, the form factor is similar, and it's discreet enough to carry around in a pocket and use in public places without drawing too much attention. Next, we move on to a restaurant. I tried using the camera in manual mode, setting focus and exposure, but it became apparent pretty quickly that despite the dual rings on the lens, it was just too fiddly to quickly adjust the camera on the fly while filming this type of content. The flip-up screen, which doesn't articulate as much as the G7X, it just flips upwards, just doesn't cut it for checking focus, for me or the others who used it. So pretty quickly I had to enable some of the auto features, or I would just miss every shot I was trying to capture. The images look pretty good though in low light when fully wide, but if you zoom in at all, you're very quickly at f1.8 or higher, and the majority of the lens is at f2.8. Still reasonable though.
Hold the deal.
Indoors, the internal microphones performed okay for a built-in mic in a noisy environment. No match for an external shotgun mic though, like the Rode Video Micro, but as is the norm with this style of camera, there are no external mic inputs. So you're stuck with the onboard mics unless you want to record a separate soundtrack and sync it up after.
Now let's see some examples of where the camera failed to work very well.
Panasonic has never been known for its autofocus capabilities, and this is no exception. It would, unfortunately, hunt around and lose focus frequently. I wouldn't get focus quickly enough to catch the action, or it would often just focus on the background rather than the subject. Now the G7X wasn't perfect, especially in low light, but it was better. Next, I took it out during a slightly sunny day and tried it again in manual mode.
Well, just trying out this Panasonic LX15, and I brought it out to see what it would be like for vlogging.
Without a wind muff, the outdoor sound quickly became unusable. I just couldn't get the exposure as I wanted it. Unlike the competition, this camera doesn't have any ND filters built in. The lens isn't threaded, so you can't add ND filters either, although there are several stick-on filter adapters out there on the market if you can be bothered.
So short of changing the shutter, which is set to 50th, ISO is down to 125, and the maximum f11, which stop right down on the aperture. So it's looking pretty bright here. Got zebras all over my face.
Out of the sunlight, the results were much better, but still at some pretty extreme settings. Let's try a vlogging test, and here is one of my biggest issues. The camera crops in 4K from a nice 28mm equivalent to 36mm. That means you need very long arms or a handheld tripod for vlogging to get the lens far enough away from your face. And again, the autofocus just simply can't be trusted, even in good outdoor light. The bright light also means that you can't see the flip-up screen well enough to ensure it's in focus. I don't think the OIS is as good or as smooth as the G7X either. After a few more days of playing around with the camera, I ventured out to Camden, and using the fully automatic settings allowing the camera to adjust the shutter speed as well to compensate for the bright light, I was able to get some quite nice shots around the market and the canal, if a little bright in places. That said, there are some nice images to be had if you have the time to set the camera and can see the screen okay. I really struggled to use the manual exposure on this camera. In the end, I set it to Aputure priority at f11 and allowed the camera to adjust the ISO and shutter speed to get the exposure, but it was still overexposed in places. I tend to shoot a lot of B-roll in order to cut around the bad shots, allowing me to still cut some nice sequences together. But still I find I missed some really nice footage, which was just too poor to use. I also missed the viewfinder, something I didn't have on the G7X, but I've come to rely on my bigger cameras, especially for checking focus in daylight. All of this footage is straight from the camera, without any exposure or colour correction.
I've got a delicious cauliflower vegan curry on naan bread. It's absolutely delicious.
Again, here are some of the shots that didn't work out well, mainly let down by the focusing system, either hunting and ruining the shot, or like the pizza oven where it just failed to get focus at all. Or focusing on the background rather than the subject, making the shots unusable. I bought this for a very specific purpose, for nighttime shots, where hopefully I can spend a bit more time setting up the exposure and focus manually. So watch this space and see how I get on with it over time.
At the end of the day, you get what you pay for, but this camera's not cheap at over £500, and to be honest, I expected better from a Panasonic. I like Panasonic gear, and this can give some nice images, but would I recommend it for vlogging? At the moment, probably not. But like any camera, it takes a while to get used to it and know how to get the best out of it. So watch this space, so subscribe below and keep an eye on whether I decide to use this camera or sell it on.